Hello there. I am Steve Castle. This is a talk on interpersonal biofeedback, which I will call a hybrid of two evidence-based therapies. Little bit about me. I have a background in the arts, studied at California Institute of the Arts, film and video. That career didn't work out, so I shifted careers in my mid-20s or late 20s and studied biofeedback with the Tumans in Los Angeles, and eventually got my master's degree. I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist, so my practice is kind of mixed. Like someone will come in for marriage counseling, someone will come in for individual work with self-esteem, then I'll have a biofeedback patient, then I'll have someone else for psychotherapy, then and then neurofeedback. So I have over the years had this very mixed pattern, and eventually I was able to sort of merge the two. I also wrote down here some influences, which I won't read to you, and that I'm also somewhat of a political social activist. I'm writing a book on why mental health care is failing in America, and I'm working on a film that has an anti-nuke theme. So most of my patients come through insurance industry. I was one of those people who signed on to managed care in the 90s because we were told in order to survive the changes in business that we had to sign contracts. And I did sign those contracts, and I'm still haunted by them today. So I'm hoping in 2024 to get off 2 or 3 of them and to have mostly cash pay clients. Insurance companies, if they even pay for biofeedback, they think of it as just something that's passive, where you hook somebody up to like cheap instruments and let them sit in a room. I don't know what they think, but they certainly don't. You pay out at a reasonable rate, which will be a thread in my book. So interpersonal biofeedback, which would be working with couples. Okay, let me back up. My first experience with biofeedback came when I was a child and went to a birthday party. There at the birthday party, I was handed one of these little fishies, and literally I do remember this little slight trauma where I put it on my hand and the head or the tail curls. Someone went, "Ooh, you are jealous," or "You are this," or "You are that." And then, of course, there were mood rings and that kind of jazz. But I was able to work with thought technology to come up with a screen. The criteria for me with working in any company was, can you give me video? So I could have a camera on the husband, and in this case, on the other husband, and feedback their physiology. So if you're not working with these screens, let me orient you. We have here respiration, which is the blue line. We have heart rate, which is the red line. We have, that's for him, and then here's for him. Next rewrite of the software, we're not going to have pink and blue. That was an early version, so we'll have something different. I'm going to ask them to change that. And then we have hand temperature, and for both, and sweat gland activity, which is flat because it wasn't being measured in this session. And then we've got the heart rate variability for patient 1 and patient 2 right here, where both are at about 0.1 hertz. So that is a really important development that's happened in the last 20 years of the field. So, when you are doing this work and working with 2 people who are coming with sets of emotions and arguments and things that they're sitting on, and they don't really know what interpersonal biofeedback is unless you explained it before, but still, there are 3 people in the room. There's equipment and a lot of wires connected. It's a lot of data, for a therapist to be in an empathic mode and then also be a robot to their computer, trying to make sure everything is working right. So it really takes a team of people in the back room to process Tim and Tina's data. It's a joke, and I assume that some of you are laughing. Okay, so you can go much simpler with this. Ray Varlinsky, who's a California therapist, I haven't talked to Ray for a number of years, but he was working with 2 M waves where he would have them mounted on mic stands, and and stop the session and go, hey, I noticed that you're not going into the blue zone, you're in the red zone, or something like that. And he worked that out. Berlinski, his method was to teach couples to detect when they are stressed and use techniques to calm themselves. He addressed over arousal, as a means of why people go into conflict. He worked with communication and had them focusing on positive, effective interactions. Okay, and he used the psychophysiology component was the M wave to increase heart rate variability. You can go really cheap. This is one that I have in my office. I give them to some of my patients. They cost like 3 for $10. You can find them on Amazon if you look up reptile thermometers or refrigerator thermometers. The reason why I like this model is because it updates like once a second. So the older types of this unit, would be like every 20 seconds, it would give you a reading, indoor, outdoor thermometers, whatever. But this one literally has a fairly quick update and it's cheap as anything. Otherwise, you can use the old standard ones, which I have a bag of on my desk, the little, let's see the face of them. These guys where, you hold the bottom, and those are really inexpensive. You can buy them at any of your biofeedback outlets. Here's a way that you can use, I'm kind of political, so I put the ex-president of Italy and his wife, who had marital conflicts when he was president some years ago, Berlusconi, I think was his name. And when I'm doing telemedicine, here I'm using the DoxyMe platform as an example. With my wife and I, we superimposed these faces on. Well, I superimpose them, but you can just clip them to the person's collar and read what they're getting. So biofeedback has also become, as some of you have maybe working with home training systems, the TPS system, which I have, can fit right on the finger. And here's the picture of my sister's back of her head as she's working in a remote session that we did a little photo shoot for. But it's also, they have software for working with couples. Now, I'm not here to push any brand like Thought Technologies. As I showed, there's other equipment that you can use. It is just the platform that I work with. And when I send out to couples or individually, I send a box with this notebook, and the equipment's inside, inside the package, and it's a really nice little setup. Now, I forgot to mention that I do have a disclaimer to make. And that is that because I work with a lot of insurance cases, and typically they don't pay, or I won't take insurance for biofeedback, I don't have the kind of practice that I used to have with biofeedback. I do mostly psych. And getting people in for interpersonal biofeedback has been really hard. I've only, this kit that I have for sending out the TPS system, I've only sent out one of them, and I didn't collect any data with that case. So I have nothing to show with that. And in the office, it's been a while since I've worked with a couple. What I do is spot do it. So I'll explain to you the paradigm I did for research, and how we would do it in the office. And but I really, I'm really mostly here because I really believe in this, and I want you guys to publish papers, to do this work, as your dissertation and so forth. So there's some stats here on marriage. Marriage is decreasing, divorce is increasing. I'm looking at small print here, so I will need my glasses. Here's some statistics for the crude marriage rate in Europe, which is the orange line. Yeah, there's my marker, my pointer. This is 1964 to 2020, so we see decreases in marriage and divorce rate is increased. And the marriage rate in the US from 1990 to 2020 shows it's plummeting. Okay, so marriage rate in the US has almost halved in the last 30 years, with 10 for 1,000 people of this population choosing to tie the knot in 1990 versus only five for every 1,000 people in 2022. That's what they call the crude rate. In 2022, 50% of all marriages are expected to end in divorce. And subsequent marriages, which I am in that stat, have an even higher chance of ending up in divorce, which I am not in that stat, with 60 to 73% of second and third marriages ending up in divorce, respectively. I do know people who've had unsuccessful marriages. Lots of reasons why. But a rise in the divorce rate has been one of the most visible features of the family since the 1980s. Divorce rates also, statistics show that it's been falling in the US, and divorce is less likely than it was 30 years ago or some of the decades since. So less divorce may not indicate increased marital satisfaction. It really might be an economic thing. And as our country, I won't go into the politics of this because you might disagree and I don't want to go in that direction, but it has become harder to raise a family because incomes do not keep up with inflation. So the paradox of marriage, okay. Married people are generally healthier than unmarried people, as measured by many different outcomes, many studies. Happily married spouses have better psychological, cardiovascular, and immune health than their unhappily married, divorced, or single counterparts. Same-sex marriages are increasing and increasingly accepted. So an emerging body of literature suggests a positive association between legal same-sex marriage and improved health outcomes. But bad marriages with hostile conflicts and disconnection can be detrimental to health, mental wellness, and safety, security, especially if you are female. So there's, violence in marriages and so forth. A bad marriage can increase the risk for age-related disease and death. Now, lab study couples with the more hostile interaction styles had larger increases in pro-inflammatory cytokine IL-6 and tumor necrosis factor compared to less negative couples. Increases were more pronounced after marital disagreement than support. In another study, couples whose disagreements were more hostile and a higher inflammation throughout the day. Indeed, more discordant hostile couples tend to have higher circulating inflammation, and their fights may trigger larger inflammatory increases compared to less hostile couples. But remember, we are biofeedback therapists, and we help people, reverse some of these negative impacts. So marriages can heal. This is from Harville Hendricks. If you're not a psychotherapist, it's very popular with couples work, imagotherapy. Experiencing empathy, the freedom to explore, trust, and insight can reset your default reactions to a more curious, tolerant, and confident stance. Because our brains are plastic, consistently positive experiences do stimulate existing neurons to adapt and connect in different pathways. Nurturing relationships help us grow physiologically and neurally in ways that are not possible in non-nurturing relationships. As adults, our most important opportunities for nurturing relationships comes through committed partnership. It's a breakthrough to realize that the purpose of a committed relationship is not to be happy, but to heal. So I think that's a really powerful end statement for that. That it's not always happiness, but it's really like what we can give back and forth to help us grow and heal. So let me now move to when I got the screens from Thought Technology and the technology, they helped me build out the system. What I did, I designed a project that I did with my own funding and in my private practice. I worked with Frank at Thought Technology for developing the screens. I got referrals from advertising. I really put a lot of energy into this. I mean, I'm not on a campus or anything like that. So It was all private practice. I wanted to look at baselines pre and post, and in between, to train couples in this interpersonal biofeedback. So after like 2 years of being steeped in putting out energy to make this happen, I had sent out more than 70 contracts to people. 20 or so cases got started with me, but only 2 completed my 8-week protocol. It's very frustrating. I finally kind of gave up. I know other people were like seeing people in the clinic for money, and I was upset about that kind of, but I kind of moved on and put it on the back burner. And every once in a while, I bring it forward because like I said, someone's in counseling with me and I'll hook them up, or a couple will be in counseling and I'll hook them up. But in my research design, I used a pre and post assessment measure called the Locke-Wallace Relationship Adjustment Test, which I actually got from John Gottman, used that in some of his literature. It's 15 questions asking you about your marriage and happiness. And it was from 1959. But in 1997, there was research to reassess it, and it was found valuable at that time. So I wanted to do a psychophysiological profile with couples while they're resting, just the baseline, while they're doing neutral talk. I think it was for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And then I wanted to see how they recovered from that. Because this is what we were taught just in biofeedback school, at least when I went to school, that you want to see how people recover from talking about something stressful or neutral. Okay, then an argument. So talk about something you disagree with, but share the stage for 2 minutes, don't hog it. And then recovery from that. So then I would do that again in the last session or the 10th session, but that we would have 8 sessions in the sandwich. And the things that we would work with. By the way, just to tell you, these 2 people here are Obama and Ann Coulter, 2 very, very extreme people. Okay, or their politics are extreme. Okay, so I wanted to educate them in psychophysiology, the fight-flight response, and how we adapt to interpersonal and environmental stressors, right? The stuff that we would do anyways in biofeedback. Get them oriented to the screen, practice affecting something with feedback. So can you make that line move, right? So I kept it very simple with hand temperature as seen in that upper picture. I would then in the second session begin with autogenics. I'd send them home with a CD for home practice. So, you can see it was a few years ago. Nowadays, I would just email them a copy of autogenics, and they would practice in the session. Okay, so guide them through autogenics and then have them practice hand warming. Session 3, they've done some homework. We review the homework. I then educate them about diaphragmatic breathing, heart rate variability, and RSA feedback. And then we would work to find their resonant frequency, as Dick Verts and Paul Lear has us do, at 5 breaths per minute, 5.5, 6, 6.5, and 7, for 2-minute intervals to see which one lands you closest to 0.1 hertz. And we have them go home and practice, breathing. I don't remember if then I would have them breathe with a respiration pacer, but I would certainly do that now. I would have them practice with more complex screen and show them what happens when they do communicate. And then we could stop the screen and review the data and see what's going on. And we do interpersonal biofeedback and educate them on Gottman's work and communication skills. And then, have them maybe try to practice that, replay it, discuss, give feedback, what that was like, and so forth. 5th session, practice with interpersonal biofeedback and neutral talk conversation. I would act as an educator and coach, leading them back to controlling their physiology. And then we would practice with interpersonal biofeedback with stress talk in the 6th session, things you disagree with. And I'm in there acting as an educator, coach, and computer person as well. And controlling physiology while they're doing that. I sometimes interrupt the session to say, okay, I noticed that this happened, to your heart rate. Why did your heart rate go up? Or did you notice his heart rate went up? Why do you think that happened? And get them thinking about each other's physiology. It's not just your own, like in biofeedback, it's what are we doing to the other person? Because, we can totally shred them if we become a jerk in an argument. So, and then 7 and 8 was really practicing, looking for weaknesses, focusing on strengths. And in the 8th session, it was like mostly practice. I wanted them to become aware of communication styles using Gottman's interventions. So in case you're not aware of Gottman's work, he talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which would be the 4 things that we do to destroy relationships, that we do in our communication, which is like criticize and blame. People show contempt, which is things like, rolling your eyes, which is basically saying F you, defensiveness, and then stonewalling. And, their counterparts, gentle startups, building a culture of appreciation and so forth. I'm talking kind of fast because I'm got a lot of data here, a lot of information. And I wanted to teach them, I statements. So, I didn't like it when you did this yesterday, versus, you were a complete jerk yesterday. You statements will elicit reactivity in our physiology. I statements that brings the other person into having some tending to what we're talking about rather than defending against what we're blaming them for. And I wanted them, and then the other person would do active listening, which is just mirroring back. So what I hear you saying is that yesterday you were upset because X, Y, and Z. Okay, so when we know we're being heard, we feel closer to the person and we are less reactive. So I wanted them to do this for 10 minutes a day. I also will say this about listening. It takes a relaxed physiology. It's really hard to listen if you've just had missiles sent to you, by the other person. It involves cognitive and emotional flexibility, the ability to shift from a narrow to an open focus, and it involves intentionality. Okay, I put here Alan Shore's work. Alan Shore is a friend of the biofeedback community. He's been to conferences in the past. Affect regulation and the origin of self, which shows here the mother-child relationship. And if the mother is not there for the infant because she's depressed or something is going on with her, the baby's brain doesn't develop properly. So that's a very quick summary of Alan Shore's intense contribution to the field. So in there, deep breathing, I do often, as I have here, I love showing this to people. I do have this. It's a lung, which was probably modeled after, human lungs, as early humans, explored physiology or anatomy or kinesiology. I can't read my top lines because the Zoom stuff is in the way. And just expressing communication. So I had to put pictures of me and my wife and other people because of confidentiality. So I'm going to talk to you now about a couple cases. I have research couple number 19 who did complete. They were represented by attorneys. Everything was going downhill after he had cheated. He would not take responsibility and blamed her. She was suspicious that something was going on still. They had one child decompensating in school. The others were accelerating. This is very typical if you come from a family systems point of view. You see these sorts of things. But they came for the sake of the children and possible reunification. Previous therapists with crisis management with them and did CBT to get them out of the crisis and shed light on what really happened. I don't think that's the right formula, but because, in that case, it worked to more argument and more damage, and they never really developed any increase in trust or agreement. So when they came to me, we worked with my model and did the stuff that I told you about. In the end, he became more objective and began to reflect rather than blame. She began to trust him because she could hear him and his process, and instead of being reactive. So this is the cortex versus the brainstem. Pausing there so that'll sink in. Eventually he moved back in. So this is from this first session, and I don't remember exactly. It was a while ago. So Mr. Duck and Mrs. Duck, and they're you can see that he's really dysregulated here. His hands are decreasing in temperature. He's at 0.2. She's at below 0.1. She's like maybe 0.5, something like that. Breathing is really bad and dysregulated. I can't read my top title, but this was a later session. Where we found out that there was where we talked about the triangle. So that's my attempt at graphically showing a triangle, even though it's not a triangle. After some time working, hand temp rest, as you can see here, respiratory sinus arrhythmia is awesome, more perfect for her. HRV is looking beautiful over here. Hand temperatures are rising. And I think there was not hookup to sweat gland activity. Okay. The data we can score with the equipment so that we can look at pre and post, pre-sitting still, post-sitting still, pre-stress talk, post-stress talk, recovery. That's really, I'm not a real data hound. So I just simplified it for the husband and then the wife. And in its simplification, at the end of this 10-week venture, his heart rate went down, green for good. His skin conductance went up, which was weird. His respiration increased, and his hand temperature went up. And she did better on 3 of the 4 things that we measured, doing worse in skin conduction as well. I don't remember what month of the year it was. It could have been hot that day. I don't know. But look there's 3 in red, 5 in green. I think that's pretty good to simplify it even more. Now, this is interesting. In the Locke-Wallace marital adjustment scale, the husband did better than the wife. But the thing is, what we found out oh wait, no, I'm not going to say that. Okay, back, I'm gonna stop there. Clinical case number 3. So this was people I was seeing for employee assistance program for 3 sessions. That's all they got, and then they were on their own. And they could have done psychotherapy, but they agreed that biofeedback would be good, and we worked with the model. She had told her husband to move out following his 2-year anniversary of job loss and failure to find a new job. And honestly, this may have been like when the economy crashed, and about 2010, maybe things were picking up and he still wasn't working. In the EAP sessions prior to biofeedback, we explored a lot of things: expectations, communication, family of origin, and referred them to group therapy. 3 sessions only went so far. So we did the model in biofeedback that I explained to you. She noticed that when she complained, his heart rate changed in the session. And so she had this insight that she causes something to happen in him. And once you know this, you think very differently before you open your mouth. When he felt safe talking because she was listening, she began to feel what he was going through and realized that her issue was more about her ticking clock So she's now able to talk about the fact that she wanted a baby and he previously avoided it. So something came out, they talked, and eventually they decided to have a baby. I think I learned that in the follow-up they called me. So this was couple number 3, session 5. So this is clinical rather than research. And again, we're looking at a baseline. So they were doing pretty good with respiration. Sweat gland activity for him was up and down, pretty flat hand temperature, like at 93. She was decreasing with hand temperature and decreasing the sweat gland activity. HRV was pretty healthy for both of them. And this is 3 minutes after the baseline. Things look even better for him, a little smoother here in the RSA, and much better over here. 6-session dialogue where he's stating his needs. He's talking, so we're going to get this discombobulation of respiration and heart rate, where she's listening and doing pretty good till about here. I don't remember why. His hand temperature is going up while he's talking, and his sweat gland activity is going up a little bit. HRV didn't reflect this discombobulation, or an L, I don't know. And then she was pretty flat. And then here's where she's stating her needs. She's still flat down here. She's a little discombobulated, it's a professional term. And he's doing pretty well with RSA, sweat gland activity going down, and temperature going up, and HRV doing pretty good at 0.1 hertz. So, and then I added these. So overall, he either from the first session to the last session, he stayed the same with temperature and his peak frequency. He went down in skin conductance, heart rate, and respiration. She, on the other hand, did worse in respiration. Okay. So there's the husband, pre and post, the wife pre and post. And again, we've got changes in their physiology. I'm going to just keep it short. Out of 8 things measured, 5 did better because I have them in green. So, also, if you were looking at the data and wondering why his respiration was 30 breaths per minute, it's because there was a calibration issue. Okay. Usually I'm going to save questions and comments for later. So unless you want to throw one out at me, Eunice, if anyone has asked something.
There were a couple of comments, but they were mostly on the, let me see, the history.
They want to know if that's a Chagall behind me right there.
Yes. Oh, they were like, oh, it's important. I like the idea of goal is not to be happy, but to heal. And I think that they're talking about with the quote that you gave earlier. And there was a question about what has been your biggest obstacle in providing biofeedback and neurofeedback for couples.
Okay. So the biggest obstacle, and of course, I forgot the first question. Oh, what was the first question again?
The first question was more of a comment on like that the goal
Oh,
is to be happy, but
yeah,
not to
yeah,
be happy,
yeah.
but to heal.
Don't
Yeah.
forget that we have like hundreds of thousands of years of survival, and so procreating wasn't a thing for happiness. We live in a very in an age where we have the ability to choose somebody, and if they don't listen to the same kind of music as us, we go, I can't do it. I can't deal with it. So we're rather picky in our privileged life, but really, we have to touch base in many departments of our more complex lives. But yeah, the goal for most of our history has not been to be happy. Regarding the biggest obstacle is that I am in a suburb of Los Angeles that's very conservative, and just getting biofeedback clients referred to me through the years has been difficult. In my earlier years, I had some doctors who were younger and insurance companies reimbursed. and the research was there. I had one neurologist invite me in his office. He knew who Barry Sturman was. This is in the 80s. And I was just so jazzed. I felt like, things were going to go great in the biofeedback world, but being in the suburbs in a conservative area has really been difficult. I think had I started my practice in Los Angeles or Santa Monica, I would have been doing nothing but biofeedback. And I know some of my colleagues who started around the same time as me, who were in high populated areas like San Diego and Orange County, built biofeedback businesses. The other thing is I do have a marriage and family MFT rather than a PhD. I think that's an obstacle, and I'm less convincing by my letters after my name. I can give you a whole history here. I used to do a lot of advertising and a lot of networking and marketing, and that helped some. But for the interpersonal biofeedback, it's more, the obstacles have been a little harder because it's something that's new. It was really hard to give it away. Still is hard to give it away, no matter how much I advertise on Facebook therapist pages. In California, I'm giving away free interpersonal biofeedback. Just need, one of the obstacles is if I'm going to send out to equipment, I need a deposit on that equipment. So not knowing who I am, people don't want to give me their money. So those are some of the factors. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this really quick because I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to assume that I have like 15 more minutes and then some more questions and answers. So there's a lot in here. Clearly, I'm not going to do any hookups today, so I'm just going to, hooking up to patients because there's no one in my room. So looking at some of the earlier pioneers, there were people like Melvin Werbach in Los Angeles and others who early on in the 70s and early 80s were talking about biofeedback. Marjorie Tuman, who was one of my teachers, worked with GSR biofeedback and published on that. But with psychotherapy, okay, so it wasn't interpersonal. And Nina Sobel, I really meant to show you one of something at the beginning. I sometimes play a video. She's an artist, and I, 15 years ago, went to the Getty Museum, and they had like a video art exhibit, and I heard in the back, in the background, artist Nina Sobel, worked with Barry Sturman and Herschel Tuman for her project. She wanted to look at brainwaves of couples. Okay, and so she used an oscilloscope back then. I guess Herschel probably helped her with this one. And they would try to match the circle in the middle. An oscilloscope is an old pre-computer instrument that electricians and people working in electronics would have. In 2010, Kemper reported on 40 years of evidence of efficacy in biofeedback as an adjunct therapy for numerous mental health conditions. In 2014, Schoenberg was able to identify 227 articles reporting multimodal biofeedback, with psych disorders. These are talking about psych disorders, not headache or back pain. So there's many articles on couples and physiology. Gottman has tons, of stuff you can read in his articles where he's citing others. So there's just a lot. This is just some of them. But what is there on interpersonal biofeedback? Well, Steve Castle and John LeMay published in 2015 interpersonal biofeedback in a relationship context. Eric Pepper wrote something in 1979 on biofeedback and family therapy. I'm going to talk about a few of these people. And Michael Kerr is an interesting one. I think I have a slide of him coming up. We can talk about it. But let's talk about Joe Kamiya. I'm not going to go into length, but Kamiya referred to his hypothesis of working with couples in separate rooms so that when their EEG would synchronize, they would be able to see each other on a computer screen. He did display this at one of the AAPB conferences, which I missed. And I hope to see you all at the upcoming one because I've already got my tickets. Les Femi, in his open focus work, initially his open focus work was for individual, but then he published on working with couples. I'm not going to go into the details of this just because of time, but it has to do with off and on synchrony training protocols, like when you're engaged or disengaged in connecting to your spouse or partner. Someone in recent years, in 2014, it's not so recent anymore, Yuval Oded published using the Alive Pioneer system, looking into each other's autonomic nervous system with stage 1, and then learning self-regulation, co-regulation with stage 2, establishing an optimal arousal communication zone was 3. Arnon Rolnick, I believe he's working with the Gottman Institute now. We were going to present at BFE together in 2022. He had to quit because he was the project because he wasn't feeling well, so I went there alone. But he is, the last I heard, he was working with Gottman Institute. This year I tried to reach him, I didn't hear from him, so I hope he's well. He's in Tel Aviv, and then the war's broken out, so I hope he's really well. But I have been in touch with Kleinbub. I've talked with him a couple times. He did a project to enhance the clinical relationship where he looked at therapist and patient. It's kind of interesting idea. Doing a 20-minute session, the therapists were asked to listen with empathy, trying to put yourself in the patient's shoes, commit to building a good relationship, and he randomly assigned feedback or no feedback conditions. He used a joystick so they could rate whether they thought they were connected. And let me go back. So in my recent communication, he told me he didn't publish the paper because his grad students made a lot of errors, but I gave him some thoughts about how he might redo it and have his students redo it. And he hopefully is at work doing that. So from a historical context, interpersonal biofeedback can attach itself to many other kinds of orientations. My background, as I briefly went over, was it was in my card at the onset, is in family systems therapy, which I believe really at Bowen specifically has a lot to do with what we learned in biofeedback about physiology. I had a hard time when I was in grad school defending that in my thesis on neurofeedback at the time. But I do believe that, I've learned a lot of other techniques and theories since then, and we all have some basis, something that really turns us on or matches our thinking style, and it can work with those. A couple things here. I don't want to spend too much time here, but reviewing some of the early pioneers in marriage and family therapy. So Beck was really more of a cognitive therapist. So, at the bottom, I say in interpersonal biofeedback, we might challenge cognitions and behaviors to install new ones and pair with self-regulating physiology of each partner. So, making statements about disputing their irrational beliefs, I guess, and then working with respiration and maybe pairing it with a better way of thinking, guiding them through that. There's Carl Rogers, who's more humanistic. And so there's, what he's about, reflective listening, unconditional positive regard, so forth. In biofeedback, we extend this to observation of physiology and coaching them to be with one another in a healthier way, like I do with teaching them reflective listening and extending it to unconditional positive regard. Systemic thinking, right? One part affects all parts, as Bowen would show, or John Bradshaw, who was popular in the 90s. You touch one piece of the mobile and all the other pieces change. So it goes when you work with one family member, everyone else in the family is affected. I've had cases where kids come in for neurofeedback and the parents say he's doing really well, and then they yank the kid out of treatment because something happened in the family, because maybe they needed that kid to have symptoms. So systems theory is based upon the work of a physicist or biologist, Bertalanffy, who proposed in 1928 his general systems theory as a broad tool that could be shared by many different sciences. So I think when I'm explaining patients about family systems theory, I explain to them that our solar system is in a nice balance, that if we were to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon, it would move off by a couple of degrees, affecting our tides, maybe our moods. I don't know what it would do. And it would have some impact to the planets beyond, to Pluto. And then some of those general systems theories, words like boundaries, open and closed system, homeostasis, adaptation, all come into the field of family systems theory. I'm going to skip Hans Selye. Well, it's a systemic thing. You have an alarm reaction, resistance to the stressor, and then exhaustion leading to death or adaptation. So we want to intervene at stage 1, not at stage 2 in our work. There's some thoughts here on the limbic system, being in danger, when our spouse is yelling at us. And we can use biofeedback as a way to reframe, educate about our physiology and neurophysiology, and reshape to reduce symptoms. Biofeedback gives us information on the others as well as our own physiology, which can change, especially if we understand it is for the benefit of the relationship with children, success in life. And so we hope that we're changing the limbic system. There's a lot of terms here. I'm not going to go through all of them for family systems theory, but how those terms came from Bertalanffy to family systems theory. Here's a little historical piece on 19th and 20th century family systems theory has roots in social work, child guidance movement in the 40s and 50s, when they were dealing with soldiers and families who were impacted by the war. Pastoral counseling got involved, and we started to develop this thing called family therapy in the 50s and 70s. They introduced the idea of systems theory, and in the 60s, the MFT license got established in California. My older cousin actually got her MFT license by sending a check for $15 to the behavioral board, no test. In the 1960s and 80s, we see, more influence of Bowen and Kerr. Michael Kerr is his protege. And in the 1980s, we see more models which continue on to today. So here's some more of the people that came, Bateson and Haley, Jay Haley, they're up in Northern California, MRI, Mental Research Institute. What I get from this is that we cannot not communicate. I mean, everything we do, through the rolling of our eyes with a contemptuous look to, our smiling muscles, communicate something to the other person. And I highlighted cardiac and brain synchrony because there's data saying that even without words, we're communicating stuff on different levels. So Kerr had this article, which I stumbled into from 1977, about biofeedback and family systems theory. And then when I got this equipment set up in about 2009, 2010, I wrote to him, and he was really jazzed that I was doing this work. And then about 7 years ago, I made a pilgrimage to San Diego to see him and speak. And it was a really interesting all-day lecture workshop. And he seemed to be not interested. Like, I don't know what happened. Maybe he was like in the retirement mode. Bowen, who I talked about, I'm not going to go into details about Bowen, other than to say that some of his terms are things I think about a lot. Differentiation of self, multi-generation transmission process, how we hand things down to the next generation, and then family therapy, I'll draw out the genogram of the family. and then societal emotional process and breakdown and regression. I'm going to read this one. So differentiation of family of origin. From family of origin, a person with a well-differentiated self recognizes his realistic dependence on others, but he can stay calm and clear-headed enough in the face of conflict, criticism, and rejection to distinguish thinking, which is rooted in careful assessment of facts, from thinking clouded by emotionality. So Bowen gets you rational thinking. Jung talks about differentiating thoughts from feelings, self-conscious from the collective, and so forth. In biofeedback, we differentiate one muscle group from the other. We're working in a kind of a PT mode, physical therapy mode. And obviously in neurofeedback, alpha from beta from theta. What Steve says is differentiation allows for emotional plasticity in ecology, a better ability to shift gears. Without differentiation of self from others, thoughts from feelings, and physiology, bad things may happen within and without ourselves, in our dyads, in a group of people. In long term, this is what Bowen called societal regression. So the results of societal regression are family systems is what goes on from intergenerationally or across borders in our political system. This is Bowen's differentiation of self, from 0, which means you're fused, to 100, which means you're very well differentiated. So we help people to go up the ladder to differentiate from their family of origin. And so the societal regression part, these are out of order, are when cops do bad things, or when people do bad things, or in general. I have a slide here from a movie where Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, with Elizabeth Taylor, and I know if you were in the audience, you could shout it out to me, Burt Reynolds, and all they did in that movie was scream at each other. It's enough to get your heart rate up, to get your sweat gland arousal, moving. And then I'm not going to show you this video because we don't have time. It's just a little boy having a tantrum in the store. This is really set up for an 1.5-hour presentation, so I'm going to skip through all of these because I'm really whining there. So I have a section in here on working with different kinds of therapies, like internal family systems, the interpersonal neurobiology movement with Dan Siegel, he talks about mind sight, which is allowing information flow in the cortex, and that we link with the other person, through our prefrontal cortex, and we create a we, where we join the other person, not mimic them. My friend Stan Tatkin has published on his he does PACT trainings, psychobiological approach to couples therapy, where he looks at he does a lot of attachment work and has techniques. And then I just want to say a few things about neurodivergence. There's a really wonderful book called the Autism Couples Workbook, and something called Cassandra syndrome, which happens in couples, because when a couple comes in, you need to know, kind of get a sense of what's going on between them. It's not all in the physiology. For example, if someone's on the spectrum, they might not be reading the other person's facial, their faces, and the other person doesn't know that. They just assume, like all the other people they've known in their lives, that they do. Cassandra syndrome is really interesting. In Greek mythology, Apollo gives Cassandra the gift of prophecy, the ability to foresee the future. He did so out of an act to seduce her, but when she ultimately rejected him, he hexed her with the curse of never being believed. Even though Cassandra had the power to predict the future and could warn people when something bad was about to happen, no one believed her. This is what spouses feel sometimes in a marriage when the spectrum is there. She was dismissed and rejected, regarded by the townspeople as an insane liar. The curse of never being believed became a source of pain and frustration throughout Cassandra's life. Despite her powers as a clairvoyant, she was all but invisible. Cassandra syndrome is what a woman married to an autistic man experiences through psychological and emotional distress. So I'm going to skip through some of this and just say, can interpersonal biofeedback help? There's a discussion here, but I'd say possibly, especially neurofeedback, if you can help open up or produce, if possible, the mirror neurons, or at least a way around not having them. So in closing, I have a couple slides and questions. Couples, when they are good together, they do things like communicate better, they can calm each other, they show appreciation, they trust each other, they feel for each other and what the other person will be feeling. They turn towards each other rather than away. They're in tune even when they're not in the same room. Is this work really counseling using interpersonal biofeedback? Yeah, it's just like a bunch of stuff. There's not a lot of room for depth issues unless you're kind of stringing things along with a, long term. A lot of reasons why to do this. Obviously, we want a better understanding of one another, and in helping each other, we help our children and society. We can use interpersonal biofeedback in clinics and schools and in sports probably, and working with persons in positions of power like police officers who are very reactive. So it's powerful stuff and must be used with a deeper understanding of human nature, psychophysiological science, communication, and family emotional systems. When news of differentiation comes to consciousness, there's an opportunity for growth or a chance to retreat. Okay. These are my extra slides. So, questions. I'm done. I heard your applause. Now, what kind of questions might I have from the audience?
Ooh, that was lovely. I do have a couple of questions. Let's see. One of them you did answer as you were going. It was, by Brian, I'm a new LPC interested in doing biofeedback for couples with my patients. What resources would you recommend to look into? And you did list, or you had a slide with a lot of resources for that with books and things and articles.
Right.
Yes, so they said thank you.
Okay.
Samantha, currently attachment styles have been what I call pop psyched, where there is interest in involving attachment styles in couples therapy and neurofeedback. Have you come across that in your work?
Not in the interpersonal biofeedback. I'm at, sort of more theorizing it because I haven't had as many cases I would like to. Like I said, I'm hoping this presentation motivates you guys to take this forward, and please feel free to contact me. And contact me if you have any questions in designing a project. I'm happy to share and give you feedback. Even if you're in school, be on your committee or something like that for your dissertation. If I can as an MFT. But in my own practice, I have taken workshops on attachment theory. I mean, it's just been there all along. Like it's interesting, my brain doesn't go there, it goes elsewhere. I don't know why. It's just so I do bring it up sometimes, and then I have to remind myself what the different attachment styles are. It's somehow never like sunk in my head. I mean, patients come in with more data sometimes and then challenge me, and I can pull that, well, what do you think, back on them. But I can also I get a sense of things. One of the things, certainly attachment theory is very deep and requires a lot of attention and training. A lot of the other attachment and other work is, they're like replays of stuff that, or redos of stuff that I learned in grad school when maybe it wasn't called attachment theory. And even the word attachment theory, I think, has changed over the years. So I don't know. My point is, like, I guess to answer your question, I haven't done it directly with interpersonal biofeedback. I will mention that Stan Tatkin, again, who's the one who gives the PACT trainings. We talked some years ago about interpersonal biofeedback before this was developed. He even had contacted Thought Technology. Stan was actually here for a party that I had about a year and a half ago, because it was during the summer. He actually sat right over there on my couch with his wife, and I showed him my equipment, because I have in my room, I have a big screen right there, and there's my little biofeedback chair. And when couples come, I have a table there and I put two cameras on my table and they'll sit. So that's my setup. But he never did anything with it. But yes, there's room.
Thank you. They said, oh, thank you. I also use the what do you think response a lot.
Well, that's, when I was a kid and I went to therapy and I'd say something, I ask a question, of the therapist, they'd often go, that's a really good question. What do you think? And I don't work that way. I'm more of I like to give information and challenge the person, so forth. Okay. Next.
Okay. Yes, there's a different question by Tracy. Did you start with MFT, with your MFT, then transition to biofeedback as a modality? How did you come across it?
Okay. So I remember I was editing my my thesis film project at CalArts. And my sister came down to Southern California. I don't know who's on this call, but my sister Marlene is older than me. She had studied in Sonoma State University. And she was doing biofeedback and working in clinics. And at the time, we're talking like in the early 80s, there was an article in Time magazine or Newsweek magazine, which listed the 10 careers to follow, right? So, obviously think stuff in computers was there, but so was biofeedback therapist. That was saying it was a promising career. So I decided after falling flat on my face, 2 years in the film industry in the Los Angeles area and sending out resumes, that I was going to change careers. So I got certified in biofeedback and then I went back to school for marriage and family therapy.
Oh, that's super interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. Let's see. I think da, 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 da. Oh, well, it's almost time. So we'll
Yeah, I
make
know.
this the last question.
That's fine.
Um, um, what has been your favorite? Yeah, okay. So what has been your favorite part of completing couples neurofeedback or biofeedback?
So the two people I finished with really felt like they got over a hump and they understood things and they were talking to each other differently. And I don't know that we pull off miracles with psychotherapy or biofeedback or interpersonal biofeedback, but anytime I can see it changes in people for the better and I leave on that note, I'm happy. So that's what fills me with joy. In my psych practice, once in a while I get a letter or I get an email from somebody of appreciation about the work that we did, but it hasn't happened with interpersonal biofeedback.
They said thank you.
And I will say John LeMay, who was working in a clinic in Northern California a few years back when we published our paper, he was seeing a lot of people because he was getting paid for it as an employee back then. And he did share with me that people were just doing so much better. So, okay, go ahead.
No, you're fine. They said thank you for the remind. Oh, wait, no. Yes, thank you. I like to remember the whys for what I do, so I'd like to ask.
Yeah, I always ask questions. And I have a question. How many are there in the audience?
So currently we have two platforms, I guess you could say. There's two that are in Zoom, and then there's 10 that are in the other platform. Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay,
So,
great. Well,
oh, yes, I was gonna say, so if anyone on the Zoom platform has a quick question that they want to throw in the chat, I'll give you like 10 seconds because it's getting time because I haven't, there's not been much activity there. Okay, looks like they're good.
okay,
So,
so please contact me if you have any questions. I'm really
yes, okay.
eager to help people.
So thank you everyone for coming to today's webinar, and thank you, Mr. Castle, for your time and presentation and being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Okay,
All
take care,
right.
everybody. Happy New
Thank
Year.
you. Happy New Year. Goodbye.